Good afternoon and welcome to the March Telco Village Board of Directors meeting. I'm John Orr, the president for this year. We've got a fairly full agenda today, and like always we will start with the minutes from the prior meeting and ask for any updates or changes to the minutes as presented.
So before that, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any other comments, changes? All those in favor? Good. And as we've done the last couple meetings, we're going to start out with open forum. Anybody wishing to address the board or community may do so at this time. Again, state your name. And again, we try to keep it to 3 minutes.
My best. My name's James Guy. I'm turn on the mic.
There's James Guy.
To the right, the button to the right.
We're registered. It's my work phone. We're registered. It's my work phone. So I really appreciate the effort from the IT group and the staff over there. I have a question. I don't want to be adversarial. I just want to ask a question about the engineering fees. And I see there's an agenda item, so maybe it's going to get addressed later on in the meeting. I'm concerned that last month there was a $70,000 request from Scott, or however it was, to sole source with Jacobs. And I'd like to ask why we're not bidding those services out. I know there was some conversation about we don't do that, but I'd like to ask why we're not doing it. I mean, it seems like fiscally responsible to bid those out. These gentlemen over here all sat last month and presented their request for capital. They had to present 3 bids. But yet we're not bidding out professional services. Can someone tell me why?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Mike Lackey has an agenda item to talk about that whole process. So if we want to wait until then to get the answer.
Well, can I come back up and ask this question? Because I'd really like to understand why. I mean, it's not a Tennessee law requirement. I know that for sure. I know someone mentioned that maybe in the past, but I actually reached out to Lowell Russell and got a legal review from the council of the state, and Title 12, Chapter 4 only applies to government agencies. It doesn't apply to TV. And I'm sure the legal recourse over there will correct me if I'm wrong. So again, I'm not here to be adversarial. I'd really like us to start bidding those services out. I know Joel and Mike at the last meeting asked could they look at it. It should be bid out on cost as well, not just qualifications. But I'd like to ask that we pre-qualify 2 or 3 vendors and then bid these services out. We're spending 6 figures on multiple projects and sole sourcing it without any bids. So respectfully, I'll wait for Mike's presentation, but.
Well, Mike, if you want to just knock it off right now, that's fine.
We've got. I'll address that.
I'll wait, but
Yeah, we've got other people, and I don't want to chew up the.
No, I'll wait, and I think it should be better. I'm asking the board and the POA to start doing that or consider doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And imply the same process for all these other capital requests that we do for these professional services.
Okay, yeah,
Thanks, James.
We'll get to it, yep.
Shauna Hunt from Tenasseee. I just wanted to start again on a positive note. I want to thank Matt for stepping in the general manager's job on a volunteer basis. I was just really impressed with the article that was in the Connection, and I think that he's stepping in at a very tumultuous time, and I think it took a lot of courage and a lot of dedication to do this job as well as his public works job. And so I think he deserves a round of applause. So.
That was kind of you, thank you. Gary's probably going to ask for a round of applause too, I suspect.
Absolutely. Gary Zika, Chota, and I just got a question. It's going to be a request. A lot of times I get up here and just state some stuff, but it has to do with one of the items on the agenda, which is the main lift station coming up. And the decision that's been made is one of the main articles or main points of the decision was that we've got a grant coming. And so I want to just go over the grant just briefly, is the grant, it's from TDAC through the county. And so there's a whole line of people and things that you have to do. And one of the things, the original grant application was for 500,000 gallons sewer storage tank. We made it 750. Now we're saying we're not going to do that. We want to use all that money on the lift station. And that was one of the main considerations was, oh, we've got a $2 million grant. We have to replace the lift station, not upgrade the lift station. You go back and you look at the Cooper reports on why they had such a big wet well. And there's a reason for that. Jacobs really didn't include or look at all the data for the individual lift stations that are feeding the main lift station. And right now, Matt's got a problem is that when you've got the I&I still being a problem, the lift station gets overwhelmed. Not very often. To get an idea, Kahiti had, 3 events over the last year, or almost a year now? The lift station wet well that Jacobs is proposing for the new one is the same size as Kahiti is today. And let that one sink in on you, because you're going to have more overflows before the I&I is dealt with at the main lift station. There's a lot of technical requirements that we haven't met any of those yet. On the applications with grants, you have to do certain things in a timeline. We haven't done any of that. We haven't made formal submittals to change the 500 to 750 or take the 750 and go to the lift station. So that's one of the big things. And then there's the federal requirements. Because it's federal money, you have to require, or you have to comply with all the federal requirements. And there's a whole list. And I did get the contract. This is the contract. You got to go through page, item through item, and make sure you comply with that. And I've received, over my years of work, I've received over $250 million worth of dollars from the federal government. We had a whole department that did nothing but make sure you cross T's and dotted I's. And finally, with the PPP loan that we received and that we had to go back, I don't know what the actual settlement says, but one of the requirements in the grant says, and I'm going to read it out, it states, have not within 3-year period preceding the grant contract had one or more public transactions, federal, state, or local, terminated for cause or default. I'm not a lawyer, but I think our lawyer should review that.
Sorry, I apologize for coming back up. I forgot to ask one question. Can Matt or someone provide me with a policy on how we manage procurement? I know I've looked at all the CCRs, I've educated myself on, the bylaws and stuff, but we have a policy with the open forum, which I appreciate, we're allowed to speak. But how do you get access to some of the policies that are governing? Are those protected or?
No, they're all, not all, most of them are on the website. In fact, the procurement policy is out there for you to see.
Okay. I'll look it up on the website. If it's on the website, I'll find it. If I don't, can I reach out to Matt or someone else?
You can send a help spot.
Jeff, will you raise your hand just real quick? That's our procurement man. If you look over your left shoulder, that's your
Thank you.
guy.
Sorry, I appreciate that. Sorry, I just forgot to ask that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim from Tenazzi. I don't want to get over my skis here. I see Scott's going to talk about the Tenazzi rebuild. I just wanted to bring up, and I don't want to sound like a broken record to the board here or to the rest of the neighborhood, but the concerns across the water from Tenazzi, the build, I'm hoping that the committee took in consideration now that the golf cart path is the landscaping. And I know Scott says they're going to work on landscaping. I'm just hoping that the landscaping that they're talking about, or the board or the committee's talking about, isn't from the water to the golf cart path. We're talking about the landscaping from the golf cart path to the actual parking lot, which is on the same plane, in order to hide the headlights and most of that blacktop. We're all neighbors here, and I hope they are taking consideration on the people and their neighbors that live across the water from this parking lot. I know the golf wanted and needed more parking. There's not a question about that, but the question is are you taking into consideration the neighbors across? And as far as the Red Book in Loudoun County talks about screening. So does our Red Book. So is the screening going to be thick lush as far as holly bushes, evergreen that stay green year-round, so that in the wintertime, the leaves aren't all fall off and you're just looking at headlights, you know, and parking lot. As if you get something that's big holly bushes, low holly bushes, evergreen bushes, something that's going to hide these high-intensity headlights. I know at the community church, we talked about the lighting actually in the parking lot, and one of the experts said that they could zero in and put it low down exactly where they need it so that it's not in everybody's bedroom, living room, kitchen. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the people that have been living there. I've been there for 20 years, and that these new headlights are so intense you can't even come down the parkway without blinding yourself that they're on and they're off. Golfers are there for, you know, 3 to 4 hours a day, where we live there 24/7. So I know we're going to talk about the Tanazi rebuild, but is there going to be enough space to put enough evergreen and lush screening, as the Red Book says, for between the golf cart path and the parking lot? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have, let Scott talk to that when he does his Tennessee update.
I want to add something. Teresa Reed, real quick.
Microphone.
Teresa Reed, I'll be quick. I know a guy, but I get nothing at home. So I go to a lot of these meetings to understand what's going on here in the community.
You know him?
I'm certain you'll have some fun with that later, I'm certain. Anyhow, just impromptu, I'm saying this. I hear Gary Zika at several of these meetings get up and offer his expertise. And I know Gary from way back just because he was getting up at one of these meetings and speaking to the specifics of the water and the water rebuild before the 750,000 gallon tank was in the picture. So I'm here to ask, my perception is he's always asking you and he's always informing you and he's always giving you information, and you guys are pondering whether you want to take it or not. I want to ask, hopefully you have a spot for him. I'm not sure why he's not on one of your important water committees, because he is a man of, 40-some years in this industry, certified, not in Tennessee, but certified as a professional engineer in this industry. And these are big, expensive issues we are addressing. And I would like to ask you, if you aren't quantifying him in some important position, that you please do that for the sake of the community. Thank you.
My name's Barry Coro. I live in Tomotley Coves. I want to talk about the $37 million. Last year, Chet Pillsbury made a presentation outlining what was required to spend, we'd have to spend $37 million. The way he broke it down, he said $6,000 per home site would be required. And that came out to 6,167 home sites. So what he did was, he said 2/3 of that will come from the homeowners on $80, and 1/3 of it is going to be financed through reserves. Okay, and he said that the $80 would last 5 years to do that. So what we've been trying to tackle, and there's lots changed since that time. Of course, $37 million is way up in the air, but what we're trying to solve, in my opinion, is the results coming from a source that's flowing excess water into the tanks, and we're unable to pump it out. So why not go to the source and eliminate the source? 2 months ago, at a town hall meeting, I talked to Scott after the meeting, and I said, what would happen if we shut off all of that water dumping into the tanks? We put risers and so on in there. He said, well, that would eliminate the problem, and we wouldn't have to spend the money. So if we look at risers, Scott, what do you think it would cost per tank to put a riser on a tank installed? Okay, can you tell me now, because I want to finish my presentation.
We're looking
About how much? Okay, so if we put, and just judging, or I don't know whether you have an estimate, how many, just looking at tanks in the village, how many of that 6,167 do you think would need risers?
Right now, our percentages at Tahiti, where we completed the study, we're running at 32%.
38%, okay. So if you took $1,000 and you did it at 38%, you basically, if you took it at $6,167 or 6,167 units at $1,000, you're talking about $6 million. And if you take 38% of that, it's a hell of a lot less. We've collected $80 for how long now? 4, 5, or 6 months? What is it?
Yeah, about 6 months.
6
maybe.
months. Okay, $80 for 6 months would generate almost $3 million we already have in reserves. So why don't we go spend that money, put risers, just looking at it, put the risers on the tanks where we look at, spend the money, okay, and hold the $80 right now. We have $3 million, we have all that money, close to $3 million in the reserve. So what I'd ask the board to do in that consideration is a lot cheaper to go ahead and put the risers on and see what happens and spend the $80. So I'd like this, someone on the board to make a motion to put on hold the $80 until we put the risers on and see where we're at.
So a lot more to come on the RDI&I update when Scott does his portion of the agenda.
Hey, John, I have a comment from online. John Tierney says that the information is a little misleading that Gary Zika put out, that the main lift station in Kahiti wet wells, the new main lift station wet well is proposed at 12 foot in diameter, whereas Kahiti is 8 foot in diameter.
Okay.
I'll respond to that. I was going off the Jacobs reports. They clearly said 8,800 gallons, and the report that I saw showed it 8,800 gallons. Jacobs report.
Any other comments? Okay, I guess we will move on. What do we have next? By the next slide. Yeah, the next slide. So what I was going to do is repeat what I presented last week at the HOA State of the Village meeting. Wasn't as well attended as our normal town halls, online or in person, but I think it's important that we celebrate the wins, we communicate what our goals are. So I just want to run through this real quick so that the folks that don't normally tune into an HOA town hall are able to see this. So the whole point of the last week's town hall was to review your goals and achievements from 24 and your goals for 25. So the key goals we had last year, contribute to our reserves in excess of $10 million, implement a business planning process for all departments, fully integrate our food service operations. Last year was our first year bringing it in-house, and achieve at least $500,000 in continuous improvement cost savings. So real quickly on each, goal was 10 million. Our actual result was 12.5 million. If you look at the income statement, it was 14.2. You got to back out the insurance proceeds from that. And the biggest contributors to being ahead of budget, admin, again, you back out the 1.7 from that 2.4. But Public Works hit it out of the ballpark with a $1.3 million better than budget performance. And golf, a little over $500,000. So in total, there was 26 projects that were run that contributed to the overall goal of well, the next one is what I'm talking about, the continuous improvement, but, so next slide. So here we had 956 against a $500,000 budget. Here's where we had the 26 projects. They were all vetted by the FAC to make sure it was truly cost savings to the POA, not just cost avoidance or time savings or something like that. So 956 was stellar performance. Every department contributed. I just listed the three biggest lump sums: utility, almost a $500,000, Public Works, 100,000, ACC, 145. But everyone had contributions. And at this point, I just want to recognize our directors and managers, because they are all dedicated professionals, and they work their butts off for the village. Now that we've been able to spend more time with them this year, I think we can really better understand the level of commitment that they have. So I'd just like to thank them for all their contributions to the village. Food service, first year in, we just said, let's just grow it by 10% and try to get to a net subsidy of $300,000. We did fully integrate it. That was obviously a job just to get everybody acclimated with the POA processes and how we do accounting versus how it was done before. We did grow a little over 11% in revenue, but we didn't quite get to our net subsidy goal. For one, we were budgeting in the blind last year. We had no idea what expenses were, but we did overall reduce our subsidy by 43%, which ended up saving the POA, approximately $300,000. So again, good results there. Business planning, for the first time maybe ever, every department created a full business plan, including SWOT analysis, mission and vision statements, short-term goals and action plans, long-term goals, and trying to identify the key performance indicators. What handful of indicators would tell an outside person whether you're succeeding at your goals. So this was a big, heavy lift, since it was the first time that most of these directors and managers ever went through the process before. And in the end, we had pretty good plans, and we'll do it again this year, and they'll get better. And we're going to actually go back one. So for 25, we've identified these strategic goals. 12 million net surplus, that's what our budget is set at. Another $500,000 in continuous improvement savings. We're working on a balanced scorecard that Joel will talk a little more about in the agenda to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about with the balanced scorecard. We're going to, through this process, identify and really solidify those key performance indicators that at some point during the year we can start reporting on monthly. Our business system implementation is on track. You'll hear a little more about that with Judy's update. And obviously we got the Tenacity reconstruction, and that, again, is still on track to open sometime in Q1 of 26. Then we're working on other things as well. Reserve study update. We just talked to the vendor this morning. That's on track to get done in the second quarter. We're obviously working hard on the I&I project. We've got other infrastructure projects. And as I mentioned before, we're doing this policy and procedure review that, I had something here for that. We have a document that is 8 pages of just listing all of our policies and procedures that are on the books, basically. 8 pages of double-sided that the initial review flagged probably at least a third to a half of them as needing update. somehow, they're outdated or they're in conflict with something that happened later. So this is a big project that's going to take all year. We're just going to start ticking through this. It's overdue. One of the early things that we did was update our Tellico Village utility service terms of service. Became a big issue with one homeowner a couple months ago. It just, one of those things that was put in place in 2019, and quite frankly, nobody ever looked at since. But when we looked at it, we agreed there were some edits that needed to be made. We made those. We actually changed the application to be a little cleaner and more straightforward, and reposted this to the website a couple weeks ago, and we're using the new terms of service and application now for any new connections to our utility service. And I compared, the TAS one and the POA one, it's almost verbatim terms of service that they use for TAS. I looked at LUB's terms of service, and we would not want to go with what they use. They have a 14-page document that outlines their terms of service, whereas TAS, this is TAS, it's one page. Ours is one page. So I think we're in a better place with that. So again, this process will take pretty much all year, and we'll be doing a hard review of all of our processes and policies. And then we're going to undergo a strategic planning process this year. We try to do it every 5 years from a board level. Where are we at now? What's our 5 to 10 year strategic plan for the POA? So, and that will, you'll see, feed into that balanced scorecard that we're going to talk about later. So that was my opening comments. And I will turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit about engineering.
Okay, real quick, at the last board meeting, you guys saw a question about the Jacobs project and their costs that they were asking for. And what prompted me to do was to go out and do a little more research on them. And what I found out was we gave them bad direction. They had a task order opportunity to build an entirely new pump station down at Kahidi, including a wastewater tank. And that's what they based that original quote upon. Once we got some clarification with them and sat down with them 2 weeks ago? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's,
10 days ago.
We got some clarification on what we really wanted. Now, what we're going to do first is get the RDI&I under control, and Scott's working on that. And some of the assumptions Jacobs made in their original report was a 8-fold increase in the water flows at Kahidi. And now then that Scott's got some data, and he quoted to us in the executive session this morning, it's only about 2.5 times. That's still too much, so we're going to fix that and get rid of it. So we've retasked Jacobs, because they have the data, to contact TAS, because TAS has the capacity. We're going to look at upgrading the pumps, doing the variable frequency drives, doing the odor control, and doing the improvements that are necessary to improve the pump station, which greatly reduces their scope and the cost to the village. The tank is, I'm not going to say it's totally off the chart now, but let's do the first things, the least expensive things that Jacobs recommended to get going. They've reached out to TAS. TAS has the capacity. Their facility's running at about 25% of its capacity. And we're not even changing that. It's just how we ship it. We've got the line capacity to more than double the flow out of Kahidi to TAS, and TAS is able to take it. So Jacobs has been tasked with going down one of 2 ways, either just upgrading the existing pump station, which is one of the options, or putting in a new wet well, which is a second option, and keep the existing running while we're getting the new one going. We're going to look at those numbers here in a week or 2. Seems like that's the number in my head. And once we get that put together, we'll come to the PSAC, we'll come to the FAC, and we'll make another recommendation on how to proceed at that time. And one of the thoughts is, Kahiti's more like one of the local pump stations out here, like down at Mille Aqua or the one there at Tokwa. And if we'll look at those and see if it's a plug and play where we can take some of the learnings from Kahiti and apply them there to improve our entire system. That's pretty much all I got.
You want to talk briefly about the original question about bidding out all of our engineering services?
We are looking at that in the future. Right now, because of the timeline, the time constraints, not only Jacobs is helping us with the grant money application right now. As a matter of fact, it's been put in front of TDEC right now. And the existing improvements at Kahiti, they've got to jump on and Kahiti's come to the forefront with some property deals that were made down there. So we've got to get that expedited right now, and to bring somebody else on for those two projects, to bring somebody else on at this time wasn't feasible in a timeline. So what we're looking at trying to do is get that done. We'll see how they perform. If they don't perform well, we'll put Mr. DeGulo to work over there to help find us a couple of new engineers.
Thank you. What's next? I guess Scott McCrae. Let's see.
You gonna work it, or do I work it over here? Next slide, please, then. All right, let me just give you a quick update on the Tenassi construction. Last week, I think it was a really good week because, one, we had the Tenassi Golf Course was completely shut down. So there we, because of that, the excavation contractor brought in 2 extra crews. We had 4 crews working last week. So what we were able to do is not only have we completed the concrete for behind the pro shop all the way to the starter shack that had already previously been in, but we finished the excavation on almost all of the new parking lot. So the area that used to have the practice green, that is all gone. We've removed somewhere between over 5 feet of soil from there, and we moved all of that soil, at least the good red clay, was moved over to where the new facility will be, the new restaurant and pro shop. And we've had to build up over there approximately, in the back corner, 14 feet from the old grade to the new grade. We've had to bring that up in 12-inch lifts. So basically what we do is we put 12 inches of clay down, and then we run a sheep's foot over it, which is a compaction device, and we compact that down to about 6 or 8 inches. We put another 12 inches in, compact that down to 6 or 8 inches, and just keep going until you get up to final grade. So right now we have the entire construction site for the new restaurant at grade. So I guess the front of it still needs to come up a little bit, but we're getting really close there. We have the retaining wall removed from behind the 9th green, and if anybody's been over there, you'll see that we've cut out a lot of those soils as well next to the parking lot. We were able to install all of the underground storm drains that are going under the existing parking lot. And right now, this week, we were able to remove the last of the cart path that went around in front of the practice green. All of that concrete's been hauled off. And we've also been able to remove the rest of the parking lot and entranceway asphalt, and all of that was hauled off yesterday. We've got a little bit more grading to do over there, and that material will be moved over adjacent to the ninth green. For anybody that's been out there, there's a big hole in the ground over there. We've got to build that up about 10 or 12 feet as well to get the front of the parking area back level. We did install our overhead power lines the first week of March, so we've got all that in, so we've got power to the pro shop, and everything's there. When I put this together, I think we were about 3 weeks, this is a week-old slide. With all the work we did last week, we're probably only about a week behind schedule now instead of that 3 weeks. They did so much work last week, so that they've really made a tremendous catch-up on that. So I think we're moving well on that. The tap upgrade, before I get into, as I go into this, let me just clarify one thing that I want to make sure everybody understands from that first comment that the gentleman made in the beginning, and why I started on the I&I. But he did say that my comment was, if we fix the I&I, we could get rid of all of these projects. I want to make sure that the clarification is the two wastewater storage tanks that were in the projects, the one at Kahidi and the one at in the main village. That is the projects that would be removed, or if we fix the I&I. Not all of the pump station projects, not the freshwater projects. So please don't think that if we fix I&I for $1 million or $2 million, that we eliminate the $36 million. That's something else that we're working on and looking at those projects. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that, and if I misled you, I apologize. So, no, but.
Which of the 36, how much of the 36 million will we eliminate?
The two tanks and all. So that's approximately 3.5 at Kahidi and approximately 6.5 in the village. So about 10 million of it, yes. So, but please, that also makes the other assumption is that what we're doing to correct the I&I with these extensions actually works. And that's the part of the pilot study when I get into the I&I. That's the part that we're trying to verify now. So please, while we're trying to eliminate those tanks, until I get more data, and so far we've only had one really good rainstorm. So I go to bed, I tell my wife I go to bed every night arguing with myself, do I want it to rain because then I get the I&I data I need, or do I want it to be dry because then I can make progress on Tenacity? So it's a fun conversation I have with myself each night when I go to bed. Yeah, just rain at one side and not the other. And that happens on occasion too. So anyway, so we've got 3 current projects, as Mike mentioned a little bit. We've got the main pump station redesign. Those documents went out to TDEC and to the grant people this morning. So we're moving forward with that. Appreciate everything that Gary Zika mentioned. We are working very aggressively to try and accomplish all of the things in that contract. And Gary, you're right, it's big. So we're working on that. We will have a 60% review, design
Scott,
review.
Maybe hold on right there. With regard to the main pump station, the board needs to approve sending it out to bid. So we're going out for permitting now.
Correct.
But it's my understanding that we actually need to approve the bidding process. And maybe if we could get a motion to that effect.
John, I make a motion that we approve the bidding process in accordance with the grant documents.
Okay. Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any other comments? I guess,
Let me add a little additional color. So this is for the main pump station in the village. It is intended to allow Jacobs to go through and submit the documents to TDEC. Scott, stop me if I'm wrong. We need TDEC approval, and then that would allow Jacobs to go forward with a bid process and submit, and solicit bids for the main pump station project for review. There is still one more checkpoint for the board, and that checkpoint is when the bids are received and evaluated, there will be a recommended bid. That will come back to PSAC, it will come back to the FAC, and ultimately to the board for approval. So nothing starts until the board has approved the actual bid selection to go forward with the project.
Right, we're
So
not,
just
That's correct.
trying to provide color to everybody as to what we're doing at this point, or what we're approving as a board at this specific point in time.
right.
The other thing that I would add is this has been reviewed in detail by our PSAC committee members and in a variety of discussions. So this has gone forward with the group that needs to be reviewing at PSAC, having fully vetted and looked at it in at least two detailed meetings that I sat through with PSAC, and Mike did also. So I just want to give that background and that flavor as to what has been done before we're going forward at this point in time.
Yep. So again, we're not committing ourselves to actually building this at this point, just to go through the process. Any other comments? All those in favor? Okay, 7-0, or 6? Oh, okay.
All right.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you, John. So we've got the elevated water tank design is under review. The 60% design is under review with PSAC, and we are planning a meeting next week with Jacobs to review comments, questions, and go forward with, have them make a recommendation at that point. The Kahidi pump station, I think Mike has already covered. So we've worked a new scope out with Jacobs, and they expect to come back with their proposal next week. One of the key things about that is they'll be looking at the alternative between, as Mike said, a new kind of a package pump station or revamping what we currently have. The other 4 pump stations, as part of the TAP projects, those are they will be addressed after the main pump station construction begins. And again, what we want to try and do is keep engineering moving forward so that when we finish one, we move on to the next ones. I&I inspections began in February, and my next slide I'll address where we are with those. And then one of the big things that is part of the grant, we have to do a complete asset management plan for the water and wastewater systems. I'm engaging 3 interns this summer. I've already talked to the grant administrator, and he was very receptive to that. Feels like that was a very good approach for us to take to at least get that piece of the grant requirement completed. Okay, so a couple of folks asked, why are we going new instead of just renovating the ones? First of all, one is the existing wet main pump station does not meet the current design standards. It was really designed more on the basis of a fresh water system as opposed to a sewer system. The board of directors, as we said, really looked at the difference between the cost of renovating and the cost of new, and not counting the grant. The difference in price was incidental, and it really comes down to how long would it take us to renovate, how long would it take us to operate in a bypass mode, and then what's the extent of any repairs that had to be done on the existing wet wells. So it was a unanimous decision with PSAC and the board to move forward with new. Basically, just to summarize, the new pump station meets all current hydraulic standards and pump design standards. It reduces any operational risks during construction. If we were to renovate, we would have to go on a bypass, and last time we went on bypass about 8 years ago, we had 3 failures of the force main. So we had 3 discharges and all, and again, that risk gets higher. As I mentioned, it's cost effective, and we just don't know the conditions of the existing wet wells. And then assuming we can get all the grant requirements done, we do get a $2 million payback from TDEC for that. And again, the schedule is critical, so I do appreciate everybody moving forward the way we've done so far. Next slide, please, Karen. And I&I, basically, that's the rain-driven infiltration and intrusion. We've got the pilot study, so we've got 3 meters installed out in Kahidi. The objective of this is to determine the effectiveness of the 5-inch extensions. Everybody says let's go after the root cause first. As an engineer, I certainly believe in that. Attack the root causes. Obviously, one of the things we'll do is we'll use this data that we get from the pilot study and all the inspections for our future designs on the other places or the other pump stations. Through March 6th, we've inspected every tank in Kahidi. There were 659. That's 100% of the tanks that were out there. And basically, these inspections were not just look and see where the lid is. We popped the lid on all the tanks. We looked into the tanks. We looked at drainage. We identified where your roof downspouts were discharging on that side of the house to make sure we weren't directing water toward the tanks. We looked at the drainage and the landscaping around the tanks to make sure that they were good, and we have identified it was 212, not 213. So I fat-fingered 2 and 3 on that result there. But anyway, we also found another 25 tanks where the lids were either at or below grade, but the drainage drained the water away. So we've identified those. We will look at those again, but we don't think we'll need to add the extensions there. In addition to that, and let me just say before I move on to the next 2 sub-bullets there, when we go in and install these 5-inch extensions, we are not just popping the lids and putting a new extension on. What we are doing is we are going in, popping those lids, we're sealing the tank, putting the extension on, we're pulling the pumps out and doing PM on the pumps, we're cleaning them. We are doing PM and cleaning the float. There's 2 floats in everybody's tank. 1 float turns the pump on and off. So when the waste in your tank goes up a certain height, the float will be raised, it'll turn the pump on. Pump will go down, or the pump will pump your tank down, and then that float will turn it off. If for some reason your pump isn't draining the tank, the pump fails or whatever, and the level continues to rise in your tank, there's another float in there about 18 inches higher that will then sound your alarm. Normally when the alarm sounds, you usually call Public Works, or your neighbor calls Public Works because it's on the outside of your house. Public Works comes out and takes care of whatever the problem is. So we went ahead and so we are cleaning those floats. Additionally, we're double checking and servicing your control panel and your alarm panel. So it is a complete PM as far as we can do without doing any digging or intrusive work on your tanks. So we're trying to really aggressively go after this. That's why we're not doing 30 a day, because if all we were doing was going out, popping a lid and placing a new extension on it, we could probably do more than we are, but we're doing a complete inspection and repair on any of these. In addition to those low tanks, we found 2 tanks where the circuit breakers at the homeowners had tripped because the wiring had failed and short-circuited, and the tanks were overflowing. The homeowner was not aware of that. We went and not only did we do the repairs and repair it so that we could pump the tanks out, we notified the homeowners so that they could reset their circuit breakers and all. And these circuit breakers were tripped inside, not at the panel. So again, just something that the homeowner should notice. We also identified 2 tanks where the homeowner had planted some trees near the tank, and they had roots going into the tanks and creating some big areas for water, rainwater to get in. We did repair those. Basically, we cut out the roots and then repaired the damage to the tanks. And then, so we fixed that. So we were actually fixed a few more tanks than we identified that those were 2 additional sources of potential I&I. We finished Kahiti. Our inspectors are now in Mialakwa. We're starting at the furthest back end of Mialakwa. We'll be moving through Mialakwa. It's a little bit bigger than Kahiti, so I expect it'll take them probably another 4 or 5 weeks to finish what they're doing there. And then from there, we will move on to Tokwa, and then from there, we'll figure out the next place, but probably go back to Chattooga and go from there and work our way from the south part of the village up to the north part of the village. And I was asked to put this next slide together just to have a nice little picture of where we're going and the progress, and I'll update this on a weekly basis, and then we can either put it in the Telegram or at future board meetings. So basically for Kahiti, we've got 100% of the tanks inspected. We've got about 33% or 32% of those need risers, and we've got 17 risers put on and 19 tanks remediated, because I counted the 2 where we fixed the roots. So we're moving through on those. So basically, again, a nice, simple little visual. I think most people, you've probably seen this if you were doing a blood drive or United Way poster at your previous employer. You've seen something like this, and so I think that's a real simple way to show everybody. Any other questions or anything for me?
So going back to the gentleman's question as it relates to Tenassi, there is a landscaping budget that was part of what the board approved for
yes.
the 11.6 million in total. That landscaping plan hasn't been completely finalized yet at this point in time, but it certainly recognizes the desire to have landscape plans that help shield some of the light. Some of that may take a little bit of time until the plants grow up. So I'm not here to say that that's all going to be solved on day one, but we recognize and understand the concern, and that will be kept in mind as the project goes forward.
Okay. And thank you, Mike. I forgot about that, and I do appreciate you saying it. I think there's 2 other things. One is one of the PSAC members is an illumination engineer. He spent like 40 years working on lighting and all of that, and he has reviewed all of the parking light selections and how we're doing the parking lot lighting. Additionally, one thing that we have not installed yet, but will also help alleviate some of the automobile lights shining into those houses across the way, is along the cart path that runs adjacent to the cove back there, because there is a little bit of a drop. I think it's about 15 feet above the water, and there's not a lot of dirt on the side of about 100 feet of that. We will be putting in a railing, and what we've decided to do is put the railing in. We're going to have 6x6 posts on 6 to 8 foot centers, and then we're going with a 2x12 rough cut board that is at about, the top of it's about 22 to 23 inches. So that will keep, should the golfers not pay attention, they can't drive off the course that way and into the lake. So I don't have to issue them life jackets before they go on that part of the golf cart, on that part of the cart path. But it will also, that's about at the same height that a lot of automobile headlights are. So that will also help shield some of the lighting going out that way as we're getting the landscaping materials to grow up and all of that. So I think that will also help. And we've got a couple of companies looking at giving us proposals for actually building that safety rail.
Hey, Scott, a couple of questions, real quick. You mentioned that there were overhead power lines at Tenassi to the pro shop. Are those temporary?
Those are temporary.
Okay.
Yeah, those are temporary. That was only, that was because we would have had to go down about 15 feet from existing grade to put the underground electrical in where it needs to go. So we went overhead for construction times.
That's fine. The other deal is on the I&I. Are you seeing, have you addressed the fiberglass tanks that were put in during the COVID period?
As our inspectors find those, we've got two things that we have to do with those. One is we have to see if there's a vent on the top of the tank, because those fiberglass tanks are sealed. And if there's not a vent, you're trying to draw a vacuum on that, and that makes pumping the waste out of those tanks a little bit more difficult. When we go back and do that, we are inspecting those tanks, and we are inspecting to see if there are seals and gaskets on those. We believe that there are some without, but most have them. And so where we identify ones without seals and gaskets, we are going ahead and sealing those as well. So yes, we're taking care of that.
Thank you.
And I don't remember the exact number of fiberglass tanks we found in Kahidi, but it was substantial. I want to say 17 or 18. And we're going back and looking at those. And even though we just started in Mialacqua, we have about the same number we've already found in Mialacqua. And the ones in Mialacqua, for some reason, none of them had vents on those, so we'll be addressing those pretty quickly. The Kahidi ones, we're going to get back to as we move our way through Kahidi with the extensions.
Hey, thanks, Scott. I have Mike have a couple quick questions as well. Kind of piggybacking on the fiberglass ones that need a seal or gasket. You mentioned on the PMs that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You said the PMs are cleaning the floats, removing the grinder pumps, and PMing those. Did you also say we're looking at gaskets on why we're doing that PM?
The difficulty with doing that, we cannot look and see those gaskets because the way those tanks are, if you think about almost all of the sewer tanks, except for the fiberglass tanks. The fiberglass is just a round tube of fiberglass with a top and bottom on it. All the other ones look like golf balls with the bottom, just a flat bottom. And then there's an extension coming up from that. And then in that extension, where your lid is, there's a sleeve that goes down through that sleeve. And that is where the pump is, and that's where your floats are for maintenance and for maintenance and all. So we can't see the connections and the penetrations in there. So no, we're not inspecting those and all. But so again, that's why we're doing the metering on a gross level, neighborhood level, as opposed to trying to look individually, because we just can't. There wouldn't be enough to be able to get information on that, Joel.
Okay, I didn't know if there was like a plumber camera or anything that could get some.
There's no way to get in there and see that.
Now, on mine, since I have an older one, you're talking about a Kahidi, right, which is, 2000 and beyond. Mine house was built back in the late 80s. Mine, you can actually see the gaskets when you pull the lid off for the...
Some of the older tanks don't have vaults,
Right.
and when we get to your house,
Right.
they will be able to do that inspection when they pop the lid and see that. But yeah, most of the newer ones, they have that vault in there. They started putting those in, I don't remember exactly what year, but the idea there was to try and keep some of the solids away from the pumps, because originally they didn't have grinder pumps, they had just water pumps, and they thought that it would act like like the old-fashioned septic tanks, where you've got all your solids on one side of a partition, and then the liquid overflows, and you're just pumping the liquid out, or you're just letting it run out into a leach field if you have a farm.
So maybe a blessing in disguise that the older ones, you'll be able to see some of the gaskets, right?
Yeah,
They'll be the ones that maybe the ones that fail.
Exactly.
And I apologize. It's the first time I've seen this slide here based on what I'd asked you to do. Thank you, first off. But second, I don't think it's constructed correctly. The one on the left is total inspected. This is supposed to be all of Tellico Village, like 6,000.
I understand that, and I saw that was the way you had originally asked.
Right.
I felt like it made a little bit more sense to break out Kahidi from the main village, mostly because they're separate areas, and I think as we get the information from Kahidi, it'll be easier to translate that same information to the main village. So I've got to go back and get the rest of that data for the main village, so that if I put 5,327 tanks, that's a real number, as opposed to 6,000 or 4,000 or whatever that number. So I want to go back and get that data and all. And then if you want, I can give you a total of both Kahidi and the main village. But I felt like from a data collection standpoint, and I made this, I should have probably asked you, but I was asked to do this at the last minute, so I put it together and just said, let me do Kahidi, I've got the data, let me get the main village separately, and I'll do a similar slide for that.
Okay, I mean, if you want to do a separate exercise and do Kahidi, more power to you because of your pilot study. But I was looking at this for all of our residents to see, this is
Absolutely.
how many we have to do, and then another, so that way, you know, you'll show this, like you said, the blood drive, whatever you want to call it, you'll see that where we're at. So every resident can say, this is how many homes have been inspected, right? And this is how many remain.
Yes.
The other two, by the way, I'm not sure those are, so you're saying that the one in the middle is supposed to be based on the number that has been inspected, right? That it found to be, you know, incorrect.
Right, the numbers that need risers, so that number, because I did Kahidi and we were 100% done with Kahidi, the number doesn't change, because we did 659, we found 212, it's 100% done. Every week, that number will be going up as we find more as we go through the main village. So as we add, let's say, 100 new homes inspected, if we find, if the numbers stay the same, 33%, that number will go up by 30 or 33% or 33 tanks every week, and then we'll see how far we're getting on those. And then as we start addressing the extensions, we'll see what the progress is there as well.
Right, so, and I apologize if
No
if I
problem.
knew you were just going to do Kahidi, then I would have helped you, but the one in the middle is then incorrect, because it's just, all the one in the middle is just based on number requiring a riser. right?
Risers,
So
so-
you have 212, and guess what? It is 212. You've got to that point.
Oh, okay, all right,
You
all right.
follow me?
I
Because the
follow
way,
you.
the way, just for everybody's edification, it's supposed to be the one on the left is total homes that need to be inspected. Every home is going to get inspected. The one in the middle is a forecast based on your 213 out of 659 is 32.3%.
Right.
So the goal would be 32.3% of the total homes to be inspected, which is probably going to be around 2,000.
Right.
So you can just go ahead and automatically put that up there, and then as we go, we just watch the number that needs to be inspected, thinking that it's going to be around 2,000. And then the one all the way on the right is now that exact same number,
Okay,
2,000.
all right, I got you.
And then how many have actually been remediated.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Understand what
We'll
you
work
want
this out
now.
later.
I'll get it.
Thank
Thank you. Yep. Oh, any other questions from anybody?
So Scott said that we could save 10 million supposedly, you know, if the risers take care, okay? So in the original 37 million, the $80 was going to account for roughly 24.8 million. And we said we were going to, on 12.2 million, we were going to take out of reserves as we accumulated them going forward. So if you take the 24.9 million, or 0.8 million, I'm sorry, we're down to 14.8. I'm not trying to press Scott or anybody else in coming up with numbers, because these are revolving numbers, they're going to change. But I am really perplexed on why the board continues to charge the $80 when it's in so much in flux. What are you going to do if you overcompensate and you don't need that reserve? What are you going to do? Are you going to give the money back? You can't put it in. You can't put it in out of the reserves, because that'll be a special assessment. You can't do that. Okay, so what are you going to do if you overcharge? And can somebody tell me what the reluctance is to put a hold on it till we get better information? Because it looks like the $80 is going to be reduced somewhat.
I can take a shot at it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we started with 36, I'm gonna give you ballparks. What I remember is $36 million for TAP.
Okay.
7 million coming out of reserves, knocks it down to 29. Let's round it up to 30 to make it even. Pay for that 30 million over 5 years, you need $6 million a year. That equated to the $80 a month. So it started out $80 a month for 5 years, gets you to $30 million, which nets out with the 7 coming out of reserves to get you paid for TAP. Now, if, big if, these risers fix I&I, let's say they do, and you don't need the tanks for I&I, and you don't need those tanks for emergency backup if there's a major break in our 5-mile line, that 36 would drop to 26. That $10 million is about a year and a half of the $80 fee. So in fact, if we save the 10 million and everything else stays the same, give or take $1 million or whatever for the I&I with the risers, instead of charging $80 a month for 5 years, it knocks it down to $80 a month for 3.5 years. Laid over that is, you're going to hear, and I think we're talking about it later, maybe not, we're taking a look at, relooking at the $80 fee as we speak, based upon where do we end the year with cash, what's the revised forecast for capital spending, revised forecast for the grant money, and take a look to say, okay, should that $80, what's the number that we need to break even?
Break even on what?
On paying for all these new projects?
Water and sewer?
Yes.
Okay.
That the TAP was set up for. So it might say, instead of needing $30 million funding, which is the $80 for 5 years, maybe it says we need 20. So then the board has a decision to make. Do you keep the $80 in place and just shorten the term, or do you lower the monthly fee and keep the 5 years? All that's being reviewed and discussed at this time. So if you want to know my hesitation, until I get a recommendation from PSAC and from the FAC and we have all this analysis completed, there's no reason to change the $80, because what we'll do is adjust the term. It won't be 5 years any longer.
Yeah, I know, but the $80 in our homeowners, you're a homeowner, I'm a homeowner, that's causing a lot of consternation out there. People are getting $400 bills while they're watering, including the $80. And one other question just for you, please. When Chet, you gave me a number, it's 36 versus 37, okay, that's fine. But when Chet explained this, tell me where I'm wrong. He said it takes $6,000 per home, which would be approximately 6,000 homes, and 6,000 per residence in order to fund it. He said that at the time, he said the $80 would produce 4,000 of that $6,000, and 2,000 would come from reserves. That's what he said in the presentation.
Yeah, all I can tell you is $80, it's what, 40, it's like $5,000 per property owner over a 5-year period, right? $80 times 12 is 48.
Yeah.
So I don't know where those numbers came from, but again, if you start with the total, and what we're talking about is it going to be 36? Is it going to be 26? It might be 40. Whatever the number is, you subtract out the 7 million coming out of reserves, which is coming from the excess cash generated from the water and sewer bills, which we're also going to be looking at those rates. You still got that difference that has to be funded by all property owners that have water and sewer.
I agree.
And it's a matter of how many years do you spread it over? The other thing I forgot to mention is the timing of these projects. They're being drawn out.
Right.
So it says you may not need the money as soon as possible, but you still, since we operate on a cash basis here, we just can't go to the bank and say, give me a $10 million loan.
No, I understand.
We got to have the cash on hand to pay for these projects. So I want to ask your patience, we are reviewing the $80. We're looking at the total fee. We're looking at water and sewer rates and how's this all come together to make sure this village stays financially stable and has the cash available to pay
Absolutely.
for these projects when needed.
Okay, absolutely. But when you're doing that, just a suggestion, once you get solid savings that you know is going to reduce the $80, instead of doing it on a timing basis rather than 5 years, 3, I think it would behoove us to consider reducing the rate so that people get a little relief from their water bill.
That's all has to be said, because again, you get to the same end. You got to have X number of dollars. Do you do it over, you shorten the term or lower the payment and keep the term? Yeah, it's like refinancing.
Yeah, so I just would confirm what Steve said, is at the last FAC meeting last week, we instructed the FAC to start their remodeling now as opposed to waiting until the reserve study was complete. The original timeline was we'll get the reserve study done in the second quarter, then third quarter we'll start remodeling the cash needs in preparation of budgeting. Well, there's no need to wait until the reserve study is complete to start our process, because we now have new data, right? We're a year smarter than when we first did this model. You know, our cash position has changed from a year ago. Our project scoping has changed, our project timing has changed, so they're taking a whole fresh look at it and have committed to getting back to the board in the June timeframe with a completed analysis rather than starting it in June or July for a fall completion. So we'll have a much better answer come June on the disposition of the asset fee.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say, John, I just want to reiterate what Steve said. You know, the INI, the reason why we're doing this pilot study and we're doing this is we need that data in order to present it to PSAC, in order to present it to the board, the FAC and the board. There are a number of people, some of whom are in our water and sewer department, that don't think the primary source of the INI is from the lids and that the risers aren't going to get us there. Now, we know it doesn't have to get us 100% of the way there. It just has to get us partially there. The question is, if it helps, if it partially helps, is it enough? And I just need it to rain a couple more times heavily at Kahidi, and in order to get some of that data, and then we can move forward. Believe me, as a homeowner, I feel the same pain that everybody else does, and I appreciate everything that everybody's doing and every question that's coming from the residents, and I get it when I go out. So I'm more than happy to answer that. I'm trying, and we're trying to get it as quickly as possible and do it right so that we know when we get to a tank and fix it, the INI is not coming in through the lid when we leave that tank. If it's coming in someplace else, there's nothing I can do about it right now, but we know we've stopped one potential source. Let's go on to, and let's figure out whether that's going to be enough, because that is, if there's low-hanging fruit, that's probably it, and that's what we're trying to do. But again, thank you, everybody, for this, and thank you for giving me the time to update this. Joel, you got one more for me?
Yeah, unfortunately, just based on what you just said. So, assuming that the experience from the Public Works employees that says remediating the tank tops won't get us there, I don't want to get too much details, but part of the PM or the inspection is whatever it is that they're saying could be the reason why they don't think tank top remediation will get us as much bang for the buck? Is it something that they can't, that they're looking for why they're doing inspection, or it's a different animal that we'll talk about at a different time?
It's really it's water coming into the tank some other way other than through the lid. And again, as an engineer, until I get some data, I can't give you a better answer than that. That's why we're doing it this way, and then we'll go from there.
Hey, Scott, just really quick, we have a question online about, will homeowners get notified after the engineers are done with what they found? Are they leaving like a leave behind or knocking on doors or anything?
I'm collecting that data from the Public Works folks, so I will have that information and can give it to people. The inspectors are going by, they're knocking on everybody's door. They start work at 7, so if there's a knock on your door at 7:02, no. We don't come to anybody's house until a little bit after 8. So we're at least giving you a reasonable amount of time. Now that it's gotten dark, early in the morning, they're actually filling out their paperwork first thing in the morning and then heading on out to Mialacqua. So somewhere between 8 and 8:30 would be the first time we would go. If you don't answer or if you are not home, they're leaving a hang tag on your door so you know we were there. If we do find something that is critical that the homeowner needs to know about, they will get in touch with the homeowner, like those two that I mentioned where we found where the circuit breakers were tripped and they were not tripped at the panel. They were inside. We will make sure the homeowner knows about that. And then when we come back and as we start doing the remediation, putting those extensions on, we again are knocking on the doors, letting folks know. About 50% of the time, by the time we're walking down your front yard to your front door, somebody's coming to the door and recognizes our guys have a truck parked out front, and they're coming to do it. But yes, we're telling you, but really all we're doing is adding those extensions and doing the PM, so there's nothing really to let the homeowner know other than if there was a problem that needs homeowner attention.
Scott, one more, because I've always wondered this from a personal basis. When you check those tanks, do you verify that that red light and the alarm goes off when that limit switch gets hit?
When they do the remediation, when they're putting extensions on, yes. But our inspectors that are just looking for the potential sources of I&I, no, we don't. They don't have that capability. They don't have that skill set.
Is there any way from a homeowner to verify that system works?
Hey, Steve?
I would say yes, but we don't want you to, because usually you cause more problems when you do that than
If you
you
want
find.
yours, I'll show you how.
Somebody has to hold your feet.
I think it's fair to say that if a homeowner has a concern, I'm looking at Matt and Scott here. If a homeowner has a concern, call Public Works, have them come out and check it for you, which they would be more than willing to do. Do not get into a system that you do not understand. And let me give a public service warning. If you're really ambitious and you want to pop the lid off, there's gases there. And it could be adverse to your health. Please call Public Works.
Absolutely, yes, and both those panels have 220 power in them. If you've ever touched
Yeah.
220 power, you won't forget it.
Yeah.
So we're happy to come if there's any question in your mind. We don't mind making a visit.
Yeah, and we did have a homeowner the other day who, after our inspectors left, decided to test and see if his alarm panel worked, and he pushed on the test button and then shorted everything out, so we had to go back out and fix it. But he did call us the next day, or that day after he did it, and said, "I think my panel's not working." Yeah, okay. So please, call us, don't try to do it yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. You're up.
So I wanted to just update the public. I know there was a lot of, or at least I interpreted a lot of eager anticipation for AT&T to put their fiber installation. And we are, there was a couple of months in 2024, and they have started ambitiously in Tokwa. And I would say they are almost complete in Tokwa. That's the good news. The bad news is their ability to install without impacting our water and sewer system, specifically sewer, in Tokwa has been a real challenge. In the last week, they They impacted 5 sewer lines in Tokwa. Of course, there's a knack for impacting the sewer lines at about 4:30, 5:15. It's never at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I just want to update the board. I was just made aware of a break even since lunch. So it wouldn't appear that it's getting better quickly. All I can say is, one thing that I know a lot of residents are observing is there's a lot of trucks on the streets when they're doing the install process, and then when a line breaks, you get more trucks in the street. That's us showing up. We generally do our absolute best to say, you're done for the day, give us some room. And this is something that the board, we discussed it a little bit this morning. AT&T, I think, is attempting some remediation procedures, but it has, in some, at the very least, resulted in putting them on a pretty short leash going forward because, there was one particular evening that I know my crews were out till about 12:30 in the morning fixing 2 breaks that occurred in one day. They're back at it at 8 o'clock in the morning because of all the things we're talking about. So I know there's great anticipation for that service to be available. We're just encountering some initial hurdles to getting that achieved. So that probably concludes my update. I probably need to do more preparation for updates at these meetings. It's not something I'm accustomed to having to do, but that's what I do have to offer for today.
Okay, thanks. We're going to have Kevin just do a quick review of the Blue Book updates.
Sure, good afternoon. The board has asked me to provide an update on the status of the Architectural Control Committee process for revision of the Blue Book, which, as you probably know, is the Residential Construction Handbook, which provides for the regulations and guidelines for construction of improvements on private lots. The ACC typically revises its Blue Book on an annual basis. It's a living, breathing document, and we try and address ongoing issues that we're aware of and that we see in our experience due to changes in construction methods, materials, enhancements in the permit submittal process, and alterations in the inspection and enforcement process. This year, the process has taken longer than as is typical because we're diving into some more substantive issues than we typically do. And no surprise, a lot of that is focused on some of these I&I issues. We're trying to do our part to participate in that remediation effort. So this year we're focused on a number of substantive issues that are designed to protect existing drainage facilities, swales, and other components of the drainage plans or facilities on properties, and to better control alterations that are made within the area immediately around the installed sewer tank. This is both for new construction as well as existing homes within the village. So I wanted to give a couple highlights of kind of what we're looking at, and then I'll give you a sort of a timeline of where we are in the process for review and ultimate approval. In terms of some of the highlights, as I touched on, a lot of these are related to drainage and I&I. One is that we're going to be now requiring, this is a timing and process change, we're going to be now requiring completion for new homes of all of the landscape plan elements and the engineered drainage plan at the time of final inspection. In the past, we had the civil engineer inspect the engineered drainage plan at the time of final inspection. However, we had allowed a period of up to 90 days to complete the installed landscape plan after construction. And what we found was that many times the engineered drainage plan was implemented and approved by the civil engineer, but in that 90-day time frame, landscapers come back in and made alterations. And so what we're trying to do is get that all approved and processed at the same time to avoid incidental alterations to the approved civil drainage plan. So that's one sort of timing and process change that we're making. Another important process change we're putting in place is requiring what's called a landscape alteration permit. And there are two components for what this new permit is going to be entail. One is if you're altering any existing swales or drainage facilities, and this is on new construction as well as existing construction. If you are making a material alteration to existing landscape drainage facilities or swales, you're going to a permit is going to be required. The second is if you're making any grade or landscape alterations within 6 feet of the installed tank, a permit is going to be required. So both of these process changes are designed to protect the existing drainage facilities and to avoid damage or incidental issues created with the tank that could lead to I&I or other problems. So these are very substantive changes. We're also going to be putting in the Blue Book the standards for tank lid installation and clearance and some of these things that we're talking about. So it's part of the process on the front end for all new construction as we move forward. Another thing that we're related to drainage, we are adopting TDEC standards for landscape drainage alterations, typically swales. And any landscape drainage alterations that involve rock or fabric weed barrier, we are going to be adopting specific TDEC installation standards to ensure that those function appropriately. If rock, for example, you're going to have certain sizes and types of rock that are appropriate to put in drainage facilities and swales. Landscape fabric, we're seeing a lot of times people just throwing this weed barrier on top of things, which just creates a problem relative to the drainage because it can impede the drainage, impede the swales, or otherwise cause additional runoff beyond what you had before. So we're trying to get this in a more formalized standard process so that if people want to make changes to their drainage facilities, that it's done appropriately and to TDEC standards moving forward. Couple other, and of course we're also going to add obviously enforcement mechanisms for these permits. So if there are violations, failure to obtain a permit or failure to comply with a permit, there'll be consequences and an enforcement mechanism. That's all part of it. Because obviously if you can't enforce a rule, the rule's not worth anything. So we want to make sure that there are enforcement mechanisms on the back end to keep that process in place. A couple other highlights, there are going to be new permit requirements for demolition. Previously, we didn't have real detailed requirements, and this is in the instance of a tear down and a rebuild, and I think that's coming in Tellico Village. We're getting to that age that we're going to start seeing tear downs, and in fact, we got one demolition permit this week that's moving forward. So we're putting in place detailed standards, particularly for timing. We want to make sure that once this process is commenced, it's done very quickly as opposed to drawing out some demolition of a structure over time. And then also standards for how the waste is to be disposed of during the course of demolition. And then a couple other minor changes to requiring permits and standards for installation of generators. That was something that was not in the Blue Book in the past. And then a few changes to solar panels installation requirements as well. So those are kind of some high-level substantive issues that we're looking at. In terms of the process, the ACC approved preliminarily these revisions on February 6th, and the board has reviewed them and preliminarily reviewed these and approved preliminarily again today. So now the process is we're going to publish these proposed red line revisions until the next board meeting, so there'll be an open public comment. At any times, questions or comments can be submitted via email. I think we'll set up for HelpSpot or something, Beth. I'll let you.
Yeah, that'll be a
Contact form on that. So that'll be on the website, and also in the Telegram, we'll put a link out there so people between now and the next board meeting can see the proposed changes in red line form and provide any comments, suggestions, questions, etc. And then the board will discuss and deliberate at next month's open meeting and formally approve at that time. So that's kind of the process and where we are, and hope to get this completed next month.
Thanks, Kevin. And if you do have to leave to catch your plane, by all means. We are now going to get to the balanced scorecard introduction to the community, make sure everybody's on the same page of what it is and how it's going to, improve our operations. So I'll turn it over to Joel.
Thanks, John. So as you heard what John was saying earlier, in 2024, the directors for the POA went ahead and put together a business plan, did a good job with SWOT and all the process. John also indicated that this year our goal is to get a POA strategy for next year and beyond. The balanced scorecard is what's going to bring the two together. So this year, through the maturation process of business planning, will now give even more specific direction to Matt and his team about what the business plan should entail by giving them a clear strategy of what we need to do with some measures and targets. But I'm not going to talk anymore about it. This is a plan that was asked of the Long Range Planning Committee, the Action Committee, to develop this year. We've got a great team doing it, and John Vila is here to just give us a brief overview, a first introduction of it, with a promise to do more in the future. Thank you. John?
Thanks, Joel. Just a word of warning, I've never been told I'm a dynamic speaker, so if people start to fall asleep, can somebody give me a notice, at least here? Online, I'm sorry, I can't help those. So first thing we're going to look at is what is a balanced scorecard. Essentially what this does is it describes the organization's vision of the future to the entire organization, and it's something that becomes available to all of the organization. So not just the board, not just the directors, but it should go through everyone eventually, so everybody sees how what they're doing ties in to all the work that's going on, how their goals, their KPIs, et cetera, all tie together. And the other thing it does is it helps to focus change efforts to ensure that the right objectives and measures are being used. So that's one of the big things that you can see here. I'm not going to read all of this about all the different things that it does, but at the end of the day, it all should tie back from your strategy through all your KPIs, all your goals, all your everything, to how to also tie to your traditional financial measures so that you get that whole balance, right? And that's one of the things that's really critical, is that this tied together. And it's a learning process. This first year, you're probably going to have changes to do. It evolves over time. It evolves as you learn. So that's just something to keep in mind. What do I do? Press this to go to the next slide? Oh, wrong direction. All right, something new to learn. All right, so what are the benefits? You see here, the big benefit is connecting the dots. People can get visible connections to the projects, the programs, their KPIs, and how that ties to the strategic objectives of the organization. So I'll just give you an example from my experience prior to retiring. I worked for one of the major credit card companies, and the strategy at the end of the day was to become essential to customers by providing differentiated products and services to help them achieve their aspirations. To translate that strategy into what my portion of the company worked on, which was we were in operations, that was then turned into a vision that then drove the mission. The vision was to win the hearts, minds, and wallets of the customer. And, because if you want them to spend on that credit card, that's how you get your revenue. If you haven't got them engaged with you, you're not going to get them to spend with you. So that's why it's the hearts, the minds, and the wallets. You want them to always pull your card out. That's the end of the day, right? And that's what all this ties together to, is what actions do you need in order for that objective to be met? All right. So when you look at a balanced scorecard, it's broken into 4 key perspectives typically. You've got the financial, what they call the financial stewardship. You've got the customer and the stakeholder, the internal processes, and the organizational capacity and growth, capacity or learning and growth. The bottom 2 are more of that's where more of your leading indicators can sit. So these are the things that start to tell you in advance, how are you progressing? Because when you start looking at customers and stakeholders or your financials, those lag. You don't get that information sometimes for days or months or weeks after the interaction occurs. So you want all these to tie together and tie back to that strategy that you're working towards. So for example, so when you think about things like your organizational capacity or really learning and growth, and how all this stuff comes together, you talk about your human capital, your infrastructure and technology, the culture, right? How those things tie together. When we first started this at the company I was at, we started looking at customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. Those two things go hand in hand when you look at those bottom two. And when we first started and we measured employee satisfaction, it was around 55, 60%. Not good numbers. Customer satisfaction, we started measuring about 5 years later, and it was someplace in the neighborhood of 70%. Over the years that's been running, and that's why I talk about this as evolving, it's a learning process. How does this change? This has been a process that we worked for over 30 years. The employee satisfaction now is 90% or higher. The customer satisfaction is 85% or higher. Those two things have to come together. If employees and customers aren't both improving, at the end of the day, you will not see that revenue that you're looking for, that impact that you're looking for, and that financial. And when I talk about the improvements, we saw double-digit growth in revenue almost every year. During the economic downturns in the early 2000s, that didn't quite happen. During COVID, there was some struggles, but overall, double-digit almost every year for that 30 years was going on in terms of year-over-year growth. So you can see from one simple example, all this starts to tie together. The key thing to keep in mind too when you're looking at that is you got to have the right goals in place, right? Everything everybody does is goal-driven. You've got something you want to accomplish. If you have the wrong goals, you drive the wrong outcomes. Simple example, I'm not a golfer. There's a reason for that, because if you were looking at my goal for golfing the way I golf, it would be to have the lowest cost per stroke. Okay? Exactly the wrong goal for a golfer, right? But if I was looking at it from a purely financial standpoint, that would be the goal I'd want. So I succeed financially, but I'm horrible. So I just gave it up. There's no hope. But hopefully that just kind of gives you an example of how not having the right goals can cause a wrong outcome. And when you're starting up something like this and you're going through these processes, and I applaud everybody last year who was involved in the POA with building out all of that structure that you've started, realize some of these things may need adjustment as you go forward, as you learn what's happening, right? Like I said, I'm talking about 30 years of progress here to get to where the company I was at is at the moment. So just for the sake of time, the development plan that we've got going forward, you can see there was some work on this started in 2021. It really just set the stage for what is now getting underway in terms of a very detailed work effort that will incorporate the board, POA leadership, and it'll be a joint effort to develop this. And again, at the end of the day, we're reading books, we're going through a lot of discussions right now. We're going to start building on strategies and prototypes to then bring to Matt, to the board. Matt can bring it to his directors, and we will actually start having those reviews with them. The goal is to have it by May for a first draft in order to look at actually having this, at least a first working version for the 2026 budget process. Okay. So hopefully that was 5 minutes or less.
Thank you, John. John, thanks for doing that. Just as a summary, so in my previous life, I've done this for 12 Honda facilities, and it's a very, very successful process, and they're still in place today. So, John, thanks for your own personal experience with those as well. Thank you.
Okay, Judy, you're up.
I'm going to start with an accounting system update before we talk about the financials for the month. I wanted to let everybody know that our process is going really well. We are just about through with the design phase of the accounting system implementation. We should be probably submitting our final templates hopefully by the end of the week and signing off on the acceptance and completion of that phase sometime early next week. And then we'll move on to the build phase, which kind of passes the ball back over to our implementers side of the court, and they'll be doing most of the work during that phase. We have training scheduled starting the third week of April every day, about an hour and a half every day for our team, and then that will be followed by testing and workshops that we'll have workshop calls every week to go over what's working, what's not working, and any changes we need to do. So we're still on target for our July 1st go live phase. And again, that's really, phase one is really just accounts payable and purchasing, and then we'll move on from there to try to look at each of our accounts receivable sources, our point of sales, and evaluating those and trying to optimize each of those one at a time.
Judy, part of that phase one include GL?
Yeah, and the general ledger as well.
Okay.
Apologies, yes.
Yeah, and I'll just add that for the board and for the residents' benefit, Ed Grolleman and myself are part of a governance oversight group that is meeting monthly with the implementation team to just understand where they're at, review any challenges that they may have run into, ask questions, and that oversight group, in addition to Ed and myself, Doug Sloan, who is a member of the FAC, is heavily involved in participating in the meetings and is providing some oversight and direction. And then we have two members of the newly formed IT committee, advisory committee, who have background in accounting system implementations, who are also part of that group. So we're watching what's going on and raising any flags where we see concerns, targeting primarily from a schedule, but also, very key, make sure that we're doing this right in terms of identifying areas of concern and getting those addressed up front. So just adding that color commentary.
Yep. We appreciate all of that help and input that we're getting from them. And I think the IT committee and Ed's side of the court will be very helpful in helping us to identify opportunities for improving when we move past this phase one into phase two, to kind of go ahead and start running down the court right now so we can pass the baton a little quicker and get started with making some improvements with our point of sales things and get our AR rolling in the right direction.
Excuse me, and the name of the system?
It's Sage Intact, INTACCT. Okay, well, let's look at our financials. Oops, I'm going the wrong way again. Okay, let's look at our balance sheet. Our cash balance at the end of February was $34 million. That is up by $3.2 million since the end of December. We are earning a weighted average rate of return of 4.53% on our reserve balance and approximately 3.5% on much of our operating cash balance. Our balance sheet remains strong. Looking at our total assets, we have $71.8 million at the end of February. That's up $3.3 million. Our total liabilities are $17.6 million. That's up $2.4 million since December, and that's primarily due to increases in our unearned revenue, which is we'll look at over there on the other side in a minute. Our debt-to-equity ratio remains at 17%. Over on the top right-hand side, we're looking at our accounts receivable and our allowance for doubtful accounts. The health of our accounts receivable remains strong. The ratio of our allowance balance to the accounts receivable balance is 38% this month, down from 40% at the end of December. That's a step in the right direction. Information on suspended accounts. The balance due on suspended accounts is up for the month, but down year over year. The current balance is $920,000, and that represents 39% of our accounts receivable balance. Suspended accounts are those that are more than 90 days past due. If you look down at the bottom section, the bottom right section of the spreadsheet there, that is our unearned revenue. The current balance at the end of February was $9 million. We again see those upfront payments from our residents for assessments, prepaid golf, unlimited golf plans, rec fees make up, where's the total on that? We've got golf 1.6 and other prepaids are $2.2 million. These prepayments provide a significant boost to our cash flow throughout much of the year. The composition is there. The utility assessments represent 29% of the current balance. That's where they're installing the utility tanks in the ground. And this balance also includes $1,869,000, $1.9 million of the water sewer infrastructure asset fees that have been collected and as yet unspent. Let's take a closer look at that water sewer infrastructure asset fund. So the balance forward from December was $1,113,000. I've put a little red asterisk by all the numbers I'm going to highlight. We've collected and contributed $912,000 to the account in January and February. We have spent $152,000 on two of the projects this year. That's the elevated water tank and the main pump station. And as a result of these transactions, we will see $152,000 of earned income on our income statement, while the remainder of the funds collected are still in that unearned balance that we just saw on the previous slide, which was $1,869,000. Additionally, the account has earned $8,791 of interest in 2025, and the balance in that account is now $1,882,000, which ties back to our balance sheet on the previous page. Okay, let's look at our income statement through February. We finished February with a gross profit of $4,753,000. That is $67,000 better than our forecast, which is basically on target, 1% better. We beat the prior year gross profit by $438,000, and that's primarily because we were doing better in food service and in our utility department. That's the water, sewer, and utility tanks. Our expenses through February finished $186,000 better than the budget. The primary contributor to this result year-to-date is maintenance expenses, which are $169,000 under the budget. And most of this was from various public works departments, maintenance of sewer lines, common property, and some sewer tank installation expenses. Golf maintenance and food service also had some unspent maintenance expenses. Our other income and expenses are contributing $291,000 favorably to our budget through February. $152,000 of that total comes from that revenue that is now reported as earned because of the water sewer fees that have been spent on one of the 5 projects that we just saw on the checkbook. And also interest income is currently $96,000 better than expected year to date. That's kind of a timing difference. We predicted $18 million, we budgeted for $18 million at the September rate of interest, which was about 4.25%. And we are with the expectation that we're going to spend reserves on these major water, sewer, and Tenacity projects. and currently we have $30 million in reserves, that number will come down and the interest will balance out over, so it's timing differences, basically. Our net income through February totaled $928,000. If we add back our depreciation expense, we have a net surplus of $1,332,000 through the end of February, which is $543,000 better than budget expectations at this point. And if you'll remember that $1,332,000, we'll see it again on this slide. So right here is a look at our net surplus by division, net of, and it shows the reserve spending out of each of the departments. And we can see that our operational net surplus, less the $640,000 that we've spent in January and February, leaves us with a net surplus after the reserve spending of $692,000 year to date. And here is another view of our reserve spending. We have a total reserve spending budget, including the carryovers from 2024 of $21.7 million. That's the $5,647,000 plus the $16,071 at the bottom of those first two columns. We have authorized spending for these projects of $13.6. The largest piece, of course, is the strategic piece, which includes the Tenacity rebuild and the accounting system project. And as a result, there's the departmental results that make up the $640,000 of reserve spending to date. And does anybody have any questions about that before we move on to the requests
I got one.
for the current month? Okay.
If we go back to your income statement,
Girl.
and I'm going to guess it's timing, but on your other income,
Yes.
will you recognize that $150,000 of earned income now from the fee, $80 fee? Is that just the timing, or is it a problem with the budget didn't assume that earned income?
We did not budget for any of that because at the time, we didn't know what the timing of the projects was
Okay.
going to be, so that's going to create
A
an
favorable
ongoing
variance?
permanent, yes, a variance to the
Okay.
budget.
Thank
Yes, sir.
And then on the interest income, Judy, that will be a little bit of a permanent difference because compared to the budget, because the principal balance is higher than what we had assumed. We thought the spending was.
Yes, we've got 30 million versus 18, the average of 18 million
Yes.
for the year.
So that's going to be a permanent benefit over the entire year compared to
As
the
long as we don't
budget.
go below 18 million at
Yes.
the end of the year and create the offset
Yep.
going in the other direction later in the year.
Thank you.
And Judy, on one of your first slides, you had the total liabilities went up over 2 million. I might have missed why.
That's largely from unearned revenue, which is people prepaying their fees. That the bottom right-hand corner where it starts with, I need to put the title back in there. I think I deleted it. The utility service assessments, the unearned, that's money collected on, the 20% that gets collected on your water and sewer bill is that $698. Golf-related prepayments, that's mostly from the unlimited golf. And then the unearned water sewer infrastructure asset fees that have been collected but not yet spent on a project are 1.9 million of that total. And then the assessment stock revenue and rec prepayments is the $2.2 million.
Maybe another way to explain it, let's just do golf fees. When people do prepay, like they buy their annual, you receive the cash. The offsetting entry on the books is you now have a liability because it's unearned revenue. So
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 or 11 out of 12, when you see a change in the debt, long-term debt, it's because you've got a change in your unearned revenue, which is a matter of people paying cash up front before the service coming.
You're welcome. And we recognize that golf revenue, they buy those plans and then they recognize it as revenue based on the actual monthly experience for golf play overall. Okay. And now we have one of these that you guys have already you've already talked about it and voted is the engineering design and bid support services for Public Works. For the Jacobs engineering piece, but I don't know if you want to reconfirm that, and then I'll let Wells come over here and talk to you about his golf requests, golf maintenance requests.
I think we're good for
Good
Wells.
for the
Unless there's something else that you all wanted to say.
about the
Okay.
public works request. Okay, thank you.
All right, back again. It's a quick month. We can just go down the list. I can start with those two Toro 3500 mowers. These were actually a 2024 request that were ordered in September of 2023 and never arrived. So they're supposedly going to be here at the end of the month, 1st of April. Pretty straightforward request. It's our small primary rough mower. Ideally, each course has 3 rough mowers, a small mower for T surrounds, green surrounds, bunkers, steep slopes, medium mower that can kind of get in between some bigger areas than a larger pull behind unit. These would be to kind of not necessarily replace our old small primary mowers, because we're going to keep them as a backup, because our medium units are also 12 years old with over 6,000 hours. We experienced quite a bit of failure with those medium units last year. And with only one small rough mower and one pull behind mower, we could not keep up. We're mowing, depending on the course, 60 to 80 acres twice a week to try to keep up in the peak of the growing season. So our idea is to keep our old 3500s for backup in case the medium-sized unit goes down. And then in 2026, we will request to replace the medium-sized unit. At that point, we will offload these 2 smaller units, or the medium unit, keep a small unit for a backup. Any discussions or?
Yeah, so I will move that the board approve the acquisition of a small primary rough mower, a Toro 3500 for use at Toqua in the amount of $55,122.
Why don't you just add,
Let's make it 2, one at Toqua and one at Tenassi.
I'll second that motion.
Any comment, questions? All those in favor? 6-0.
All right, next would be the Tenassi trim mower. Again, each area of the golf course has very specific needs and types of mowers that we would need. This trim mower at Tenassi, it's the same platform as the Toro 3500. This is Toro 3100. It just has reel and bed knife cutting units instead of a rotary cutting unit. This is what we use at Tenassi to mow around our greens and our walk paths. It's kind of the only mower we have to effectively mow around our greens. Some of the steep slopes we have at Tenassi, we still need to have the ability that the reels can shift left to right or right in the center. It allows us to kind of hold some of the steeper slopes at Tenassi. You know, we looked at the Lads Jacobson TR 330. You'll see on the request is slightly less. They're not really utilized in our area very much. A couple people I'd spoken with said that if they had to choose between the TR 330 they had or the Toro 3100, they would go with the 3100. Also, we have kind of a fleet of these type mowers. So, again, you know, just the availability to interchange parts with a backup or pull a backup in if something were to happen. You know, it's the same mower. We do have a 3100 currently. Each course has 2, again, kind of for a backup. So we currently have a 2010 model that is in the starting lineup, I guess you could say, and a 2006 model that is kind of in the backup position. We have a plan to just go ahead and sell the 2006 model and then keep the 2010 for a backup. And we have a couple buyers interested in that 2006 model.
So I will move that the board approve the acquisition of a trim mower at Tenassi, a Toro 3100, the amount of $58,187.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0.
Great. And the last one on the list here is a unbudgeted request. This is to replace the tractor that burned up last fall. in the middle of November due to a leaf fire. I think most everybody here has heard the story, but I can kind of follow up on it as you would
What's the
like.
lesson learned?
The lesson learned is you learn a lot from a fire, as we can all attest, tenacity as it is. That's not a shot, it's just saying, when things happen, you learn, right? So I think the lesson learned is we're going to reroute some exhaust on these tractors. We're going to install some fire extinguishers on these tractors. We're going to do some things to hopefully remediate this from occurring again. So,
And how much were the proceeds?
$21,766. That covered the cost of the tractor and the vac. The request would be to use all of this $21,766 plus another $6,664 of capital reserves to cover the cost of a used tractor with 1,300 hours on it for essentially half the price of a new tractor.
And Wells, can you also add in some color commentary? Golf has sold already this year about 23,000 of used equipment.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we've sold, can't remember off the top of my head how many pieces, but right at almost $24,000 in used equipment. We've still got a few more pieces we think will add up to possibly another $10,000 in used equipment. So as it stands right now with the insurance proceeds, plus what we've sold, we're going to net out still positive, $16,000 from the used equipment sold.
So I would move that the board approve the unbudgeted capital expenditure of a tractor for use at Tenacity in the amount of $28,431.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay.
And one more on the bottom of the list, it was less than 50, and you can see the request is quite a bit less than what was budgeted. I'd be willing to discuss that if anybody would like any sort of explanation on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks, Wells. Well, with that, we're down to any liaison report outs. Anybody learn anything as far as the board members in their attendance of advisory committee meetings that might be good for the broader population to know?
I don't want to steal any thunder from Casey, but Golf Talk is supposed to be talking about the new scorecards, new rating system, new tee complexes from a rating perspective, so that's on the horizon. And there were some discussions at the GAC, which I didn't realize, but if you wanted to get your GIN handicap card, as you'd have to pay the MGA fee, which I think is $45, and there's been a request that in the future, that if you don't want to join the MGA and pay the MGA fee of $45, that you could have an option just to buy your GIN card. And the GAC talked about it. It appears that, I'm not going to, again, make the decision, but it appears going into 2026, that option will be available to buy your GIN handicap or pay a little bit more and get all the benefits of joining the MGA, because in order to play an event in the MGA, you got to be a member. And that's what that vigorish on top of the GIN cost is. So that's all I'm going to say about golf. And great job on the greens.
John, from an FAC perspective, I'll just note that the annual financial statement audit is scheduled to be started late this month, primarily field work done in April, with a target for a report to the board at the May board meeting. We talked about that the process has started for the reserve study, and then later this month or next month, I think it is, a subset of us will have a insurance review meeting, which we are now doing twice a year. So all of that is underway and keeping the FAC busy.
Yeah. And us.
Hey, John?
Yeah.
The only thing I'd like to mention is the Highway Advisory Committee. has been dealing with TDOT and the local county of Loudoun on a small business grant that we're eligible for. It currently has over $200,000 in the reserve of it, and we have access to another $100,000. And they're looking at installing, taking that money, coupling it with some other federal grants, and getting the roundabout installed at Mealacqua.
That'd be good. Anybody else?
Liaison?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the communication, they're looking at rebranding HelpSpot to Answer Desk. Yes, Beth? And in my humble opinion, it's arguably the most, one of the most powerful tools in Tellico Village, and maybe arguably could be one of the most underutilized. So look forward to a good rollout and creating a lot of visibility and enthusiasm about a very powerful tool, and see if we can't utilize this even more. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. As you can hear, it's a busy time for all of us, but I think we're making a lot of good progress. We're having fun doing it, and appreciate, no, really, I mean, this is, it's satisfying to be able to move the ball forward in such a rapid manner now. You know, we've had, you could call it a crisis by having a vacuum at the leadership level that we've been able to fill and rally the troops to move forward, and we're doing that in a very rapid manner. As you can see, all the things we have in progress and all the things we're hoping to get done this year. So it really is a satisfying process for us to have that kind of impact on the community. So appreciate everybody's support. Have a great rest of the day. We'll see you next month.